Morning, it is Tuesday, April 8th. This is a regular scheduled meeting of the Oconee County Conservation Bank Board. I'm Emmeline Jones, Chairman of the Bank Board, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. Our first discussion item is the approval of the 2025 meeting dates and time. So we've approved the meeting dates at our last meeting, which are April 8th, May 13th, August 12th, September 9th, November 12th, I think, December 9th, February 10th. We must meet 3 times a year. If we don't have business, we're not going to meet, but we're rocking and rolling with these applications, so I feel like we're going to be meeting the majority of the time. So we've approved the dates. We just need to approve the time, the meeting time. Because the 9 o'clock does not work for several of our new members. Does anyone have a motion?
Make a motion for 3 p.m., if that's acceptable.
I can second that.
All those in favor? Meeting at 3 p.m.
Second.
That works.
Opposed? I know, it's tough. It was It's tough.
I'll do my best.
Yep, well, thank you.
It's either that or like 5:30.
Yeah, it's either that or, 5:30.
Emlyn,
Yes,
were you okay with that? I just need it for you were good for 3?
yes, it was, yes.
Okay, I just needed to make sure.
In the essence of assuring that there's a quorum, we want to make sure everyone can come as much as they can. The minutes.
Is that gonna be for all of the dates, 3 p.m.?
Yes. The minutes were attached to our backup, the minutes from our March 18th meeting. I did have one correction, Jennifer, and that is on the final page. Mr. Smith expressed that he against certain types of easements that restrict property owners. We need to add an is in there. Mr. Smith expressed that he is against certain types of easements.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there a motion that we approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion, any other corrections? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And not to put you on the spot or anything, AJ.
My apologies.
Do not apologize. I'm glad you're here. We're going to move right into the treasurer's report.
3 p.m.
Okay, sounds good. All right. What do I need to do with this treasurer's report? Read it off?
Absolutely, as concisely as you can.
Okay.
And also it was included in the backup material as well.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay, so per the treasurer's report in the period ending of February 28th, this year, in the Dogwood State Bank, we had a month opening balance of $160, and then we had a $10 bank service charge, which leaves us with a balance of $150. Now, for the period ending on February 28th for the local government investment pool, we had an opening balance of $362,450.17, with the deposit of a reinvestment, looks like of interest, $1,267.08, and that leaves us with a balance of $363,717.25. And again, that's in the local government investment pool.
Thank you. Is there a motion that we approve the treasurer's report?
I make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
And is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Vote is 6-0.
Thank you. And fundraising, public relation reports. Does anyone have any discussion items under that? Grant status, any items?
There's no change in grant, but
Thank you. So I'd like to switch around the discussion items and go ahead and move into the Keys Family Farm application for funding. And then, after that, we'll talk about the bank account. Is that acceptable to everyone since we've got guests? Everyone should have a copy in their backup information that was emailed of the grant application. And with us, we've got the landowner, Mr. Keys, nice to see you, and a representative from the South Carolina Farm Bureau. So do you just want to, Richard, introduce yourself? And first of all, since this is our first application from the South Carolina Farm Bureau Land Trust, will you just spend a minute or two?
Sure.
We've got 3 new board members talking about how the Farm Bureau got into land trusts, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the property.
Should I come up?
Sure.
Okay.
And by the way, if anybody has questions, this is the time to, as we move along the application, if you see things, this is the time to ask them. Because we're not gonna be we're not gonna be scoring today, but we will be at the next meeting.
Sure. Well, thank y'all very much. We appreciate the opportunity. South Carolina Farm Bureau Land Trust was actually created, or in the process of being created, starting about 4 years ago. It was officially sort of brought into being as a 501c3 nonprofit in 2021. And then with the formation essentially of the sort of the background work of the land trust, it was eventually created. And then I came on board actually from Upstate Forever. I spent several years working at Upstate Forever, and then I was hired to help get the land trust up and running and working. And so I started in May of 2023. So we've been at it just almost 2 years now. A little bit of accountability. We've closed 15 easements in that time. We have a total of 50 easements in process across the state right now.
Congratulations.
Working very hard, and we're already growing our staff this year. We're going to be bringing on 2 new folks this year. Up until this point, it's been myself and an intern, part-time intern, so it's been quite the busy. I think the reason why I think we've been so successful so quick is because Farm Bureau has been at work in the state, working with our farming community for over 81 years. And really, you know, a lot of folks think of us as insurance, but really we are a farmer membership group. We are an advocacy group. Everything we do, we're accountable to our farmer members. We have 30,000 voting farmer members in the state of South Carolina. We have about 100,000 members in total that support what we do. We're accountable to them as a staff. We work for our farmer members. And so the land trust was just one more tool that we felt like we could bring on board to help our farming community. Last thing I'll say about that, there's one statistic that I'll share with you from the American Farmland Trust. We're losing millions of good farmland, millions of acres of good farmland in the United States. We're losing hundreds of thousands in the state of South Carolina. We're on track to lose 400,000 more acres of farmland. This is not just vacant land. This is active farmland before 2040. 62% of all development that takes place in the United States of America is happening on good quality farmland. So I always say, you know, South Carolina's got one of the best farm-to-market road systems, and now, unfortunately, the market is coming to the farm. It's kind of working against us now. It used to be that's how we got goods to market from the farm. Now the market's coming out, and the farms are being developed at a very rapid rate. South Carolina is now the fastest-growing state in the union. So all of these sort of pressures are coming on our farming community. We're having a large turnover of older farmers, moving to the next generation, and some of them are choosing not, the next generation's not coming on board. Families have opportunity to sell for a lot of money to developers. That takes that farmland out of production forever. Most of it, when it's developed, its topsoil's taken off and it can't be reclaimed as farmland. So our mission is to do what we're doing here today, which is trying to save as much farmland as soon as we can. So that's kind of our
Right.
mission and our history, so.
So we've got the application.
And this is our first application to the Coney campaign.
is.
So if we did anything, we'd appreciate any feedback on that if we.
And I also might mention that it's our largest as a bank board. I think our largest so far was a little over 200 acres, so this is twice as much.
Oh,
As far as
fantastic.
acreage,
Well, that's
so
good to hear.
it's,
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
So if you look at page 2, just a little bit of the basics. Our board can only approve, except in special circumstances, 10% of the conservation value.
Okay,
This is at 5%.
correct.
If you look at the numbers. We've got 553 acres. The most we've conserved is 238. And I'd just like to hear from Mr. Keys, I'd like to hear about the property. What prompted you to put it into an easement, some of your plans? You just want to spend a minute telling us that? We'd like to get to know
Sure.
more about the property.
Appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning. My family has deep roots in Oconee County. We've been around for a long time, been in agriculture. I grew up on the farm, and I'm still there. My residence is there, and maintain a beef, cattle, and timber operation. And growing up, it was cotton and corn, and slowly transitioned to grass and trees. But my family's been on this land for generations, and it's remained in agriculture, and I want to see it saved. I'll be passing that on to my children. Neither one of them are going to come back and farm, but I want to see the land preserved, and that's my main purpose. So anything that the Farm Bureau or Oconee County Conservation Bank can do to help my family preserve this land for future generations would be greatly appreciated. Any
Thank you.
questions?
So, just a couple of technical points.
Yes.
When I read through the materials, at one point in the materials, it seemed to me you said you had 1 acre of wetlands. And in another point, you said you didn't have any wetlands. Can you clarify that for me?
No. I'm not sure. I've never been advised on that. To my knowledge, there aren't any wetlands.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's all
I-
usable land.
In the one,
yeah, in
it
fact,
was early on, I think it was, in the application.
right.
It was filled in, it said 1 acre of wetlands.
Yeah, was it wetlands and ponds? Because there is a 1 acre pond.
Oh, maybe
And it could
I
be
wasn't
the
reading it
pond.
right.
Yeah.
It's up from Lee's house.
Okay.
But also too, that I did want to mention, one of the significant conservation values with the property is Little Chowastowie Creek runs right through the middle
Right.
of a section. We
Absolutely.
got about 1.5 miles of stream frontage on Little Chowastowie, and it's only about 1.5 miles before it runs into Lake Hartwell. So that's one, and outside of being for the ag potential, there's some really good conservation value here when it comes to water.
And Highway 11 also divides the property.
That's
So
right.
I have property on both sides of Scenic Highway 11.
There's about 1 almost 1 mile of frontage on highway.
Which to me is just amazing, if we have the opportunity to preserve a mile a mile of frontage on Route 11. To me, that's just an amazing opportunity. One other question that I had,
Sure.
just for clarification. At some point in the application, there was a reference to the conservation easement allowing 2 more residences to be built in designated areas.
That's correct.
Okay, where are the designated areas? Or haven't they been designated yet?
Yeah, we've got some locations. So the way we do it in the easement is we're allowed to, the landowner is allowed to have up to 3 different locations for each future residence. So we'll have, somewhere between 5 and 6 different potential locations. But what we're also restricted from doing is putting any of those locations in what are called natural areas, which will be those stream areas and that sort of thing, and then also trying to keep them out of like the most productive agricultural part of it. We do claim the prime and statewide important farmland soils as a conservation value in the project as well. So when we have a building area, we can't violate those natural areas, we can't violate those prime and statewide important farmland soils, so we locate those to where they don't interfere with the protected conservation values in the project.
But they haven't been specifically delineated yet.
That's a good question. Did we
No,
cite those yet?
no.
Okay, we have
We've
not
just talked
cited
about
those.
it in general terms,
Yeah.
but we haven't said it's gonna be here, here,
Okay.
here.
Yeah.
I-
Sure,
We plan on doing that.
yep.
So one thing I wanted to mention, Lake Hartwell has 962 miles of shoreline. 27% of those shoreline miles are in Oconee County. So Lake Hartwell, a lot of people think about that being Anderson, Georgia, whatever. We've got 27%, which
That's
is
right.
pretty substantial.
So, Ms. Chair,
Yes.
so the areas you have designated for homes,
Correct.
who are those for? I mean, who are those designated for? Is your land gonna be sold to someone else and they're gonna be able to build a house there?
That's a
What are those for?
possibility, or family.
That's right.
The land can be sold, but it can't be developed.
Conservation easement and the terms with it go to the new owner, even if Lee's family doesn't own it in the future. They'll have that right to build those 2 new homes on the site, but those homes are connected with the land forever. They can't be parceled off and sold off. They're gonna be connected to the land in itself.
I think that's the way it should be done. I like that.
So,
At least someone-
Typically, you see,
at least someone
most
can build a house
easements,
on it.
they, depending on the number of children they have, that's the number of home sites they have. Like Dr. James that's next to our farm in Armstrong, he's got 3 daughters, he has 3 home sites.
Yeah.
I mean,
So there's 2 existing home sites there, so with the 2 future home sites, it's basically 550 acres that'll never have more than 4 homes. So the density is extremely sparse, so, and that's kind of how it works. And the other thing about it is the land trust holds the easement, so we're the ones that check on this every year. We have a stewardship responsibility. We're the ones making sure, even if Lee's family doesn't own it anymore, we're the ones making sure the terms of the easement are being upheld. We have a stewardship endowment fund that we create, so when we close the easement, one of the things that Lee will make a donation to that fund. I think in this case, it's about $12,000. $2,000 of that will go to basically go into a legal defense fund. And we also, as Farm Bureau Land Trust, we have a legal defense insurance that allows us up to a $2 million to $3 million event in any case of a legal violation of the terms of the easement. And then that stewardship endowment, the other $10,000 goes into an investment vehicle that ensures we'll be able to steward the property forever. Basically, that creates our income that we know we'll be able to, have folks that can visit the property even 100, 150 years from now. That's kind of how we fund all that. And so it's very robust and, you know,
Of this 500 acres, how many acres will go with each homestead? Do you have any idea?
they're about, do we say, it'll be no more than 2 acres per home site, but probably more like acre, acre and a half.
But so you can build a home on 1 acre. Is there a full parcel that home will be built on that will go with the home, or is this stay
Yeah.
one?
Well, we do what's called a building envelope, so we'll do an acre to 2 acre building envelope, and we geolocate those corners. It's typically a square or rectangle, sometimes a circle, whichever geometry works best. We'll site those on there, and then they're geolocated. If it's circle, we geolocate the center, and then, you gotta do whatever the acreage is. And so it's defined very specifically in the easement itself, the size of them, where they're located. Now, those parcels can be, there'll be a provision in the easement that allows those building envelopes to become legal parcels, but only for borrowing. Like if they need to borrow from the bank on that particular home area in order to build the house, as opposed to borrowing on the whole property. They can subdivide that in order to do.
But for one house, how many acres of this 500 acres will they be responsible for?
So, as far as the house goes?
Yeah.
It'll be within a maximum of about 2 acres per home site. So with the 2 existing homes and the 2 new, you're talking a maximum of 8 acres that'll be
I
involved.
think what he's asking, and I'm not trying to speak for him, I think he's wondering if you're equally distributing where the home sites are. And let's say 20 years down the road, David and Hannah want to sell a 100-acre parcel or 200-acre parcel with the easement and with a home site. Can they do that? It doesn't change the easement language, or, I mean, are they allowed to do that?
Yes, but we have to write that in there. If there's gonna be any future.
Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, I want to know how many acres total, because you have 500 acres. You're obviously, you're going to split it between family if they want to build a home there, which I like the idea of allowing your family to build homes on this big property. They have to be responsible for so much of that 500 acres. So would one home have a 100-acre tract for farming that they're responsible for? Would this home have a 250-acre tract to be responsible and farm? This one home have another 100 acres?
So in the easement, we've written in a number of what are called subdivisions of the property. And I think we limited it, was it 2 or 3 subdivisions that we had?
It was,
Three.
And I apologize, I should have looked at the easement terms. before
no,
it came to me.
it's,
And
I saw it in there.
The reason I'm asking is if they're responsible, if they're gonna farm this land, they're gonna have a home on this land, they'll be able to build, say, a barn to
That's
house
correct.
their equipment.
Yes.
They'll be able to do that. That's why I want, how many acres will they be responsible for if they build?
So we set an acreage limitation on each of the allowable subdivision. If it was 2 or 3, I can't remember in the easement. Basically, you can take the 550 and divide it, let's say a maximum of 3 different properties out of it. And each one may have a home site, and probably will, based on where we locate these things. Plus, we'll put operational areas where they can build like barns and structures like that. But we'll set a minimum acreage that you can't go under, meaning if we want to limit it to no smaller than 50 acres in one of those. So you can only do 3 out of the 550, but the smallest can be 50 or the smallest can be 100. That's usually how we limit that.
Okay, so the 550 acres will go to, really will stay with the 3 pieces of property.
That's correct, yeah. And it doesn't, none of these rights have to be used. It could stay as a 550 with the 2 current houses. These are just provisions we're putting in, really more for Lee's family for the future, if they want to be able to hand down part of the farm to this child and part of the farm to this child. And then they can have the ability to build a home on that parcel. The other thing we write in is timber management, all ag activities, including agritourism. And then we write in all equestrian activities. If they were to ever sell it, it could be used as a horse farm. We do, I don't know if we wrote it in yours. Sometimes we write in event venues if somebody wants to do event hosting, do weddings and that sort of thing. But that's pretty much what it's restricted to is
I have
those
a question. In the future, let's say Mr. Keys' family still owns the property. What would be the process for them if they, for whatever reason, let's say because it's such a large piece of property, they wanted to remove 50 acres from the easement? Do they
only
have
if the
to-
easement allows for it.
Only if the easement allows for it.
That's right.
And the Farm Bureau, the 501c3
Correct.
that you're with, the organization,
Right.
you guys write that in?
That's
into
correct.
the contract?
That's right, yeah.
Okay, so then there's no provision whatsoever if, let's say, 120 years from now, 2-3 generations later, they find, you know what, we need another 50 acres, we'd like to, for whatever reason, I don't know, build more additional homes for our family. They would not be able to do that if that's not written in the easement contract?
That's correct, yeah. It would be limited to 4 home sites on the property.
Okay, so there's no method of trying to amend those easements in the future?
You can't amend the easement, but you can't amend the easement to have a negative impact on the conservation values. You can only amend it if it has a neutral or it actually improves the conservation values on the property, if that makes sense.
Okay,
So amending it to add additional home sites wouldn't be a potential.
Even for their children.
That's correct, yeah.
so
So
now,
this sets the property for 4 total home sites, say the 3 subdivisions that can be divided, and all the activities that I just mentioned, that's gonna be the life of the property forever.
on those home sites, is there a restriction to the size of the home that could be built?
That's right, there is, yeah, but it's pretty good size. So basically what we do is we have like, a lot of them will do, so a general rule of thumb, like on NRCS agricultural easement, you can't have more than 2% of the property be an impervious structure.
What is an impervious structure?
Impervious would be a roof line or concrete or brick patio, anything that washes water off.
Okay,
And so we typically use that 2% limitation as far as square footage of what can be built. Now, on leaves, that's a lot. So, we may not need all of that 2%, because if you built out 2% of 500 and some acres, that's a lot of square footage. But, so in a home site with the ancillary structures involved with the home site, maybe a detached garage or a shop or a swimming pool area, we'll usually put about 10 to 15,000 square feet, and you can only go to 2 stories, so you're limited to 2 stories, 10 to 15,000 square feet of footprint of any sort of impervious structure, and it's within that building envelope, and so it maxes out, but it's pretty good size. I mean, you can do a lot with that. We basically set it up where you could build a nice 2-story home and, concrete driveway and ancillary structures and swimming pool. It basically allows for a nice home site.
Okay.
I like the idea of the nice homes. I just don't like the idea of the children not being able to build a home beside their family if they wanted to. That's kind of to me, that's the,
Yeah.
I don't like that.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's kind of, the way to think of it is a reverse, when a developer buys a piece of property, they make permanent, lifelong decisions about that property. They can take a farm and turn it into a housing development, and that's permanent. That's gonna be there for 120 years. And so this is kind of the same way. The landowner's making a permanent decision about the property that basically restricts it to what it is. And then if the family needs some other options, they can always sell the property and purchase something else if they need to for more flexibility.
I have a question for you, Mr. Keys. How
Yeah.
long has your family owned this property?
This particular property, some of it goes back to 1911.
Wow. Wow, so
A
for,
lot of it my dad put together when he came home from World War II.
wow,
Bought smaller tracks and put it together.
wow, that's a,
The initial purchase was 1911.
that's a long time, so over,
It is.
well over 100 years.
Yeah.
And you said that your children wouldn't be interested in continuing the farming operation that in there, or is it?
Possibly just timber management. They won't be into livestock at all.
Okay, okay, so, your motivation behind seeking this easement is to not see the piece of property be developed into a housing tract, or,
Correct.
okay, so it was to keep the area as a farmland agriculture area?
Yes.
Okay, while setting up provisions for your family to be able to still live on the property, whether or not they choose to participate in the farming, history
Yeah.
that was on there. Okay. Now, no, sir, I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Richard Carr.
Richard, so if, let's say, 30 years from now, Mr. Keith's family still owns the property, and they just forgot about the easement, and they start developing on a portion of the farmland. You mentioned earlier that, the Farm Bureau has the ability to come and check in on the property. What does that entail? Does that mean that you guys can just show up unannounced and walk all along the property as if you were the property owner to inspect the property to ensure that nothing's being developed on the land?
No, so what we have an annual provision that says that with the property owner's permission, we can come and inspect the property. And so
Okay.
we're coming every year. So typically, it's hard for a landowner to forget the easement's there because we were just there the previous year meeting with them.
Okay.
Now, I will say, sometimes when you get into turnover and they sell the property, you know, if there is a period of time there where if they wanted to violate the terms of the easement, and we weren't aware of it, it could happen. But typically, we're involved in the sales process as well.
Okay,
Because they're gonna find out it's got a conservation easement on it, because it's gonna come up in the title search. And then they're gonna talk to the landowner, reach out to us, because they're probably gonna wanna learn more before they even acquire it. So that's part of the service we provide when our folks are selling the property, is we work with the potential buyers and the new landowners. So it's very relationship oriented. The only time we can enter the property without permission is if we have demonstrated that we have tried to make a request for a stewardship visit and we're not getting any response. But we have to document that we were not getting any response for our stewardship visit. And so then we do have the right to enter the property without permission, particularly when we think there may be a violation in process.
okay.
So-
And with the conservation easement that's put onto the property for the portions that are allowed to have housing, you know, I understand with building code, you know, you have to have the inspector there to ensure that things are being built to the proper code. Does the Farm Bureau have any, participation in the sense of, that inspection or blueprints of the home?
Only in the siding,
Only in the.
the
housing
siding
site?
of the area. That's
Okay, so
correct.
only like, I wanna place the house here.
Yeah.
And then you guys say, that's okay.
That's right.
But as soon as that is passed, like you said, you know, you could build a 2-story home.
That's correct.
You know, just throwing an example out there, well, let's say I wanted to build a 3-story home, and I start development on that 3-story home. What would then the Farm Bureau do then, because the easement only allowed for a 2-story? Would the inspector know
Right.
that that's there?
Yes.
Or okay,
Because it's very clear in the terms of the easement. So typically what we say to our land, when you're ready to build, let's talk, let's review, let's cite, make sure the citing's accurate. Let's review the terms of what can be built, what are the limitations before you get started on the process. That's
Okay.
essentially how we do that. If they did build a 3-story home, if it were underground basement, then maybe that 3rd story wouldn't be an issue. It's really that 2 stories above. But if they built a 3-story home, it would get complicated, that's for sure.
so
But
what is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, there's 3 levels. I mean, number one, if we can work something out with the landowner to, you know, for any violation, we typically want to work with the landowner, and if there's anything we can do to mediate that out between us. If not, it goes to, I believe it's an arbitration and mediation level where we actually, there'll be a mediator brought in to help us arbitrate it out legally. And then if that doesn't work, we go to the court. So there's 3 levels. But the first level is where we would prefer to mediate out things. So it might be that if there were a violation on that, we could say, come up with, maybe, give up something over here to offset the fact that this was a violation. So we could at least say to the regulatory environment that regulates conservation easements, say, well, there was a violation here, but we limited something else here in order to offset for that violation. But I think, it's all very specific to the actual violation itself, and
Sure.
each one kind of.
Sure, I'm trying to understand, because,
Yeah, those are great questions.
But I will say, if you ever see this easement, it's like, there's a lot of language in there, and most of the language is for what you're saying.
okay,
It's what do we do when things go wrong? In fact, that's the whole back half of the
Yeah.
easement. So it's a very defined process, and I will say, we're using the same easement process template that all the other land trusts are. We're all basically working off the same playbook when it comes to this. It's actually the IRS that regulates the conservation easement process. So we're all working within these IRS regulations with our attorneys who help us develop these easement documents.
I think Jared's got a question.
Sure.
So the easement allows a certain amount of structures to be on the property.
That's correct.
Just, let's say, I grew up, like, I had this house right here, and 30 years from now, I'm like, I don't like that house anymore. It does allow that house to be tore down and rebuilt, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just saw
it's
that.
maintain, repair,
Replace?
expand, replace
Okay.
for every home site.
The only thing I would love to see different in any of this, for anyone, is the opportunity for children of the owners of this property to be able to build.
Right.
Because, I would love for my children, and I would give them land to build on my property. Just kind of disheartening for me to know that if I owned this land, I couldn't allow my children to build beside me to help on the farm, if they chose so.
Right.
That's the only thing I would love to see different on any type of easement is you have children, at least allow them the opportunity
That's right.
to build beside their parents if they wanted to.
And I think in Lee's case, there are 3 other opportunities for that to happen. So Lee's got 1 home, and then there's 3 other home sites on the property. Lee could have done more. You can probably on 500 and something acres, you could probably get another 1 or 2 home sites in there and maybe have 5 or 6 in total. But we just talked about doing an additional 2 because he already had 2, and 4 was satisfactory. But yeah, but to your point, it is pretty much locked in, so
Right.
it is something the family has to live with.
Maybe Lee doesn't want his grandkids to build, he just wants his kids.
Yeah.
But you're right, yeah.
Does this qualify under the working ag?
This one does not, just
Okay.
because Lee is retired.
Okay.
And his primary income is not from farming, it's more secondary, well,
Okay.
heck, it might be your primary income right now.
Well, in
because-
certain years it is.
Yeah,
With timber, you plant timber and in 35 years, you clear cut it. So that 1 year, you're gonna have big income, but in between, not much.
the working ag that was signed in, basically they're looking at a past 5-year
Okay.
income level. Has 50% or more of that come from farming activities on the property, but it's gotta be 5 years in a row,
Okay.
So, one more question too. I know right now it's kind of split up, the amount of grassland, the amount of timber. Does that have to remain the same?
It does not, no, and actually there's a conversion clause in the easement. So basically, we're protecting a both and or an either or, open space or forest. And so it can it can be all converted into agricultural or pastured land if need be. Now, it wouldn't in Lee's case, because there's a lot of topography. But it can go from forest to timber and timber to forest.
But it would allow somebody future to purchase this later to develop it as a farm?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
So if they want to create additional pasture land, they can. The only limitation we put on is the 40-foot buffer around the creeks. So you got 40 feet on either side, and that's a standard,
Pretty standard with DES.
standard forestry SMZ kind of thing.
So on page 11, question 4, does the property contain soils classified as prime or important?
That's correct.
Any idea what the percentage is? I think
Yes, ma'am.
I saw it down there, but if
Yeah.
there is a way that you could check that
Yep.
and send it to Jennifer, so it's,
It's 116.2 acres of prime and statewide important farmland soils.
okay,
A little over 20%.
okay.
And again, there's a lot of topography on the property, so its slope a lot of times takes it out of being prime soil. I think when it goes over 10% slope, so most of, if you ever come to Lee's, right around his house, there's like about 60 acres of pasture there. And then when you go across the road to the main property, there's a beautiful valley right there. There's the creek valley that's all in pasture. And then everything else is pretty much in timber around it. So it's a lot more forest than it is pasture land. And I'm sorry, it looks like we didn't answer the question on there, did
That's
we?
okay.
Yeah.
If you can just find that, check it, amend the application with the answer. Or maybe, I guess, if it's less than, is it less than 30%? That's why you didn't answer it.
Yeah, that might be why.
Yeah,
Okay,
he said
okay,
it's
then I beg your pardon, I'm wrong on that, then
Yeah, it would
you
be
did
less.
correct. So 130 acres pasture, 250 acres timber. Here it is, 116.2 acres of prime and statewide important farmland soils.
There you go.
You got any rock art anywhere on the property?
No. There's some in the area, but not all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't know if you had any.
Did you say rock art?
Yeah, the old Indian goes back thousands of years, like carving on rock.
Petroglyphs.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They call it rock art, though. There's like, up the creek from him is a site,
yeah.
and there's several all around Oconee.
Pinnacle Mountain, Haygood.
Yeah, all that.
I'm on Pinnacle Mountain, it's
Yeah.
it's a heck of a hike to get up there, but it's worth it.
One thing I'll mention, I'll mention it as we're working with another landowner up the Little Choastoe, just south of Westminster, that y'all will probably see that project in the future. That's gonna be almost 800 acres with the Little Choastoe running right through the middle of the whole property. So we've got another project coming that's just a couple miles up from Lee that are really gonna help start to kind of lock down this Little Choastoe area, which is kind of cool, I guess. Yeah.
Well, we all have seen the importance of water, quality and quantity, and it's one of the biggest issues, in my opinion, in the state.
Right,
So it's exciting to see
yeah.
the direct impact that this would have.
That one's gonna be, that one should be working ag too, because they're full-time farming. And I think we'll be able to do working ag through the bank, and I know we gotta be mindful of how big of a request we bring to y'all, so I think we might be a little more mindful of, could you just help, maybe enough to help them offset some expenses or something, as opposed to trying to get 10% of value or whatever, because that could be a big number.
So explain a little bit to the board about the relationship that you all have. Have you had a site visit from the South Carolina Conservation Bank Board? Because we'll need to schedule a site visit.
Sure, we have.
You have,
Yep,
okay.
Raleigh came up, because we started with the bank last summer, and then we had to pause the application to get some title issues worked out, and now that it's going back to the bank. But
Okay.
Raleigh came up, that was probably end of the summer,
It was.
August.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
what
we
is
did
their
those.
cap? Do they have a cap, like we have a 10% cap? Do they have a 10%?
Yeah, they do. It's variable. It depends on the property. So, but the max that you can do with the working ag land is 50% of the easement value. So you can get half of that easement value on a working farm. The other half they still get as a federal tax deduction. And if they're a full-time farmer, they can take that on 100% of their income. So basically, they get half of that easement value and they get a deduction that covers their taxes on it. We're doing some of those, but that's most of our full-time farmers that we're working with on those programs. To back off of that, if it is active farm land, that the people that own it are not necessarily full-time farmers, we can typically get up to 40% of that easement value. And then on a lot of timber properties, it's usually more 30 to 35%. So there's, but the bank, but that 50% is top end.
The reason I'm asking, because if you got another landowner that has 800 acres, but our board, you wouldn't, you said, I don't want to ask too much. That kind of penalizes the person that has the larger tract. He's not getting this, or they're not getting the same. It struck me like, it's kind of.
I apologize, but I just heard the bank account balance and we could wipe it out.
I know we don't have endless funds. I'm just,
I appreciate
to
you
get the
being
big
mindful
tracts,
of
it's a lot
that.
of money. I'm just
Yeah.
throwing out there, is there another source for you to supplement when somebody like us can't?
We
pay
do
the
the state,
tab.
we lean
I'm
on the
just-
state the heaviest, and the state bank is very well funded right now.
Yeah.
And with the working ag land, we're hoping, fingers crossed, it was a brand new program, they put about $3 million in it, for this year, this fiscal year. But the House and the Senate are in budget negotiations
Right.
right now, and we're hoping they'll put more into the working ag, so we can take some of the strain off of the standard bank applications that are always coming through, that are protecting all kinds of properties in the state. Some of the most gorgeous park spaces and, and mountain views. But if we can get more allocated specifically towards working ag, it'll take a little bit of pressure off the state bank. But really, to answer your question, what the beauty of the local funding is we get to say to the state that we have a matching partner who's willing to invest in this at the local level.
Right.
And the state's then able to turn around to the legislature and say, our 30% actually helped generate another 10% at the local level. And so they get kudos for actually making their money go a little bit longer. And I tell you, the cream of the crop for this is Charleston County. Charleston County created a Greenbelt program, and with all these folks, with all this money moving in from everywhere, they ended up raising like $200, $300 million. And that they have conserved 50% of Charleston County.
They do a lot of fee simple purchases, because I've actually talked to the guy in
They do,
charge
but
of that
they
program.
do conservation easements as well. In fact,
Right.
we
Oh,
just-
yeah, sure.
We've got 3 or 4 with them right now, and they're able to pay it as much as the bank. So we're able to lower our ask with the state bank,
Right.
get more from Charleston County where it's gonna impact directly, and we end up, putting deals together that way. I'm sorry, I'm getting.
No, I think it's interesting because
Yeah,
every county does things differently. We're not funded at all with
yeah.
taxpayer dollars. It's all privately funded. Pickens County just started a conservation bank board.
I think they're working on it.
So I'm not sure how that's gonna be funded, but
I know Jasper County did, Dorchester.
Greenville's got the historic.
Greenville's got one, but Greenville's, we'll see where that goes. That's there. But
I
it's
have a
working.
feeling with all the cookie cutter subdivisions that are about to go vertical in Oconee County, we're gonna be seeing more requests from people more than we have.
I hope so.
It's about to blow
It's an
up.
exciting time to be in conservation. We've got a governor who is pro
Very much.
conservation. We've got the head of DNR, Tom Mulliken's very much into conservation
That's right.
across the board. Hunting, fishing, it crosses party lines. It's-
Yeah, it really does. And I think that's the beauty of it is this is one of those rare occasions where most of us can agree, maybe for different reasons, but we're excited about the opportunity You know, I mean, I think the state's greatest asset, other than its workforce, is how beautiful this place is. I mean, I drove from Spartanburg over here on Highway 11, and it was like I mean, oh my gosh, this was the perfect morning drive, Highway 11.
This time of year especially.
And we don't want to lose that, you know, so, because that's why people want to move here.
Exactly. There's great economic value to it as well.
But then
That's
they
a
move
really good
here and
point.
kill the goose that laid the golden egg, so we gotta keep the goose from getting killed, I guess.
Their kids build campfires on top of Table Rock and burn them.
And it looks pretty good, actually. I got a video on my phone if you're curious what it looks like. I think it's gonna rebound well.
The resilience of nature,
It is.
Yep.
But
It's amazing.
it really is. If you look at, was Pinnacle in 2016? When was the Pinnacle fire?
I don't remember.
But I've hiked Table Rock since then, and it's just
Yeah.
a special place. Anyway, I'm digressing.
Yeah, and
Thank
fire's
you.
natural to the landscape.
It is, it absolutely is. Prescribed burns, this was unfortunate, but
Yeah, it was, yeah. Sure.
thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yes, thank
Absolutely. Thank y'all.
Any other questions?
Very good questions, by the way. That's.
Well, thank y'all.
We appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right.
So I'm just gonna talk a little bit about the process and, the timing of it. So, at our next meeting, which is in May, well, first of all, between now and then, we'll need to schedule a site visit. Then at our next meeting, we're going to talk about the criteria sheet. Everyone between now and then needs to fill, no, wait a minute. Yeah, fill out, we assign points. Some of the things on the sheet are very objective, it's just factual. Property, soils, acreage, water. And then some of them are a little bit more subjective, biodiversity. We're gonna go through as a group at our next meeting, come to a consensus on each one and add it up. This is very important, and I don't know why it's not on the sheet, but even though there's a maximum of 100 points, to be funded, the farmland has to have 30 points. If it's an in-holding property, which means it is directly next to, let's say, Table Rock State Park, Sumter National Forest, if it's something that is within a property that is publicly owned by DNR or the state, that only has to have 22 points. If it is non-farmland, it has to have 40 points. And if it's a cultural or historical property, it has to have 21 points. So because this is farmland, it has to have 30 points for us to recommend to county council that we fund it. This is gonna be the largest request we've had. It is still within our 10% range. Let's see, what else am I forgetting? Any questions about the process?
I do, I have one.
Okay.
So, when we see that assigned 0 to 4 points, this value, what is this value in regards to? Like, how do I know if something's a 4 and something's a 1?
That's your judgment, I think.
So some of it is what you think, what you glean from the application. Some of it, for instance, for prime statewood soil types, it's a range that's an actual objective range. Number 3, this is not a historical site. We're not gonna give any points for that. Number 6, visible from public access land. That, to me, would be the greatest point. Public access, we're not gonna have access. Size, at question 11, that's an objective, we can look through and see, that's gonna get 5 points
Okay.
because it's of the size. Water quality is a big thing. this impacts water quality. It flows right into Lake Hartwell. Section 5, financial criteria. I'm just gonna give an example. Number 3, matching funds. Because they do have approval from the South Carolina Conservation Bank Board, that would be a maximum.
So that would be 6 points.
That would be 5. For section 5, number 3. But if you.
Oh, I'm sorry, section 5.
No, that's okay. And it's a discussion too.
Okay.
Now, for us to fill this out, like, if I'm sitting at home and I wanna fill this out, I review the application, and do I review the land from GIS, or is that when we take a trip to?
You can review it that way. There are a couple maps actually in the application. But yes, 3 of us will need, at least, well, no more than 3 will need to visit the site. In order to, and we can't have 4, because if we have 4, it's a quorum.
It's a quorum, yeah.
So at our next meeting, also, the people that visited the site can give a little report on what they saw.
Site visit's pretty important.
The site visit is very important. And so this is.
Yeah, so to be clear, I mean, I guess y'all all assume this, but I'm related to Lee. So I won't have any voting. I will recuse myself on the voting part, but I know the property, so I don't need to do a visit. But like, so I'll be involved in the scoring and doing my secretary thing, but like, I won't have any vote or say if it goes or doesn't.
Right, we don't want to have any appearance of any kind of conflict, and I appreciate that, Ryan. But don't get, I mean, this is important, but it's also it's the beginning of the discussion. So we all come to the table, and we might have a difference of opinion of what the scoring should be, and then we come to a conclusion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then after that, our secretary will fill out the evaluation score sheet. Did you give one of these copies to everybody?
No, I just gave one to you.
Okay, good. So this is what the secretary will actually write down based on our discussion. And then if we do vote to fund it, we'll present it to county council sometime in June. I think they have a June 30th meeting.
I believe we only meet once in June, and that will be the first Tuesday.
I wrote down June 30th, but I may be wrong. But that's kind of how the process goes. Is there any question about the process?
Thank you for explaining.
It's very overwhelming, but if you go back and look at the ordinances, AJ, it is extremely, I hate to say the word strict, but it kind of is, like, this is the criteria, this is the application, does it meet it or not? So there's not a whole lot, there's some room for subjectivity, but it's also very,
Cut and dry, no gray areas.
No.
thank you, that's what I'm looking for. But there will be maybe some, I think one time we had a big discussion about biodiversity, how much biodiversity was on the land, and that can be something that people have different perceptions of. So, site visit. Who is interested in visiting the site?
When?
I mean, I'll volunteer to go,
Okay.
just for the sake of doing it, so we can.
Thank you.
So we can get started.
Yeah, I'll join Perry as well. I think
Okay.
it'd be a good experience.
Well, and it would be a good idea for you to be there.
Okay,
That way you could
absolutely.
kind of help walk us through on what we're
Okay.
looking at.
Yeah.
That would.
And there'll be
good
other
for us.
opportunities,
Long time ago.
Scotty, you know this property, don't you? Yeah. I mean, Gordon, you'll be the only one that hasn't been.
I probably would.
Or Or Jerry.
Just
you
drive
can go
by
to my
by
place if
myself.
you want.
Well, I've
It's.
Go down Deer Run
I've been
Road,
there
you'll go right
a
down.
long time ago, so,
Okay.
yeah.
So you know the property as well.
Yeah.
I'm sure I do.
A lot of it.
Okay.
I'm
Okay,
sure
good.
I'm sure I'll understand it.
Okay.
Beautiful piece of property.
So, before we leave, let me get y'all's phone numbers, and I'll coordinate with Richard a time between now and the next meeting,
Sure, that sounds great. And the next meeting is in May?
May 13th.
Okay, all right, that's tough.
Any other discussion about the grant application? So, now we're gonna move on to the discussion about the Dogwood State Bank account. And AJ, do you wanna take the lead on that, or Jennifer?
Sure, I can go ahead and take the lead. After a few emails between Jennifer and I
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Keys. Look forward to, coming out to your property. Yeah, thank you, Richard.
yeah, just after a few emails,
Thank you. Good luck.
I just decided, let's go ahead and just move forward with, Oconee Federal. And, just for the fact that we wouldn't get charged that monthly fee. And I've used Oconee Federal before, for both a business and my regular checking, and they're really good. I've never had any issues with them, so I was just drawing from my own experience and. let's go
So
with
the
that.
issue was, even though we voted to transfer $1,000, Jennifer found out that even with that $1,000 minimum, we would still have the $10 charge.
You could change it to a business money market at Dogwood State Bank. You only needed $100 to open, but it would not earn interest unless you had over $1,000 in it at all times.
They're earning interest on your money
I
and
know.
charging you a $10 fee.
And so Blue Ridge and Oconee Federal offered the same business checking, $100 to open, no fees, no monthly balance. So it would just be a personal preference, but I did need a board vote to be able to change it.
And has the county administrator, do we need a,
I spoke with Ms. Brock, she was okay with the change.
Okay.
Yes.
and how difficult is it to change?
I just changed banks, so I wouldn't think it would be
Okay.
super hard because we don't have anything drafted out of there.
Right,
I will need to order new checks because I have a big business checkbook for Conservation Bank, so that will be an expense. I don't know how much those will cost, so if I had to request a transfer, I would get with you and you to get
Okay.
approval on that.
I remember the last couple of times we did a funding on projects, the chairperson and myself had to go sign at the bank.
I think it requires 2 signatures. The last time I did not sign. I don't think I'm authorized to sign that. We just never went through the formality.
We didn't, so I do need to know who you would like signers to be. Right now, I know I am, Ms. Brock, Taylor was, but since he's rolled off, usually the bank can send you those forms via email, and you just e-sign and send it back. You don't have to stop by the bank and do that, but it takes 2 signatures on a check for funding.
Okay. Is there a motion on the floor regarding switching banks? Or would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make the motion to, switch the bank from Dogwood State Bank to Oconee Federal.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion?
So just to be clear, our major focus here is to reduce costs because we're avoiding a monthly fee, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, Dogwood's charging
And
$10 a month.
do we need checks, or can we do electronic fund transfers when not even have a physical check? I mean, you said the only expense was gonna be ordering checks, and do we actually need to do that?
I have never personally had a wire to an account for funding. We do get it transferred from the local government investment pool to our local bank,
Yeah,
but I have never done a wire transfer, which I do know in the past, if you'll look on the check register, they charge for that, for us to transfer money from our account to, say, the lawyer that's closing.
No.
That's usually who I write it to. There is a fee for that in the past. But I
So-
have never personally completed one of those.
So typically, when the funding is made, it is a check from the Dogwood account.
Why don't we
You're
just do a
tra-
cashier's check from the bank?
You're transferring,
I request from our treasurer to
$5 to do
transfer
that.
whatever
Yeah.
amount
Okay.
is
Yeah, be
voted
the
upon
cheapest
to
one.
our local bank.
We'll do that many.
And I write that check, we get 2 signatures, usually a representative from a lawyer's office comes to pick that up, I have them sign that they picked the check up, and I have a copy of it.
I mean, you can also do a cashier's check. I mean, real estate closings, you either have a personal check if it's under 5,000, a cashier's check if it's over, or a wire. I've never seen personal checks, you know.
for that large amount.
No.
Especially if this is funded,
Yeah,
this is gonna be potentially a large amount.
I think it's safer and cheaper to just do a cashier's check and we don't need to order checks.
I will tell you that a company, I think it's, oh man, they do charge an amount. I just recently did a
It's
cashier.
either $5 or $10, it's not much.
I think it was
It'll be
something
less
like
than
that,
ordering
yeah.
checks.
Be a lot less than ordering checks.
Yeah.
And you don't have the responsibility of having much checks either.
Yep. And it's
Yeah, main check.
usually what attorneys prefer.
Because
Yeah.
that's what I would think too.
All the ones I've dealt with, it's anything over 5,000, it's gotta be a cashier's check or a, like certified check or.
So let's hold off on ordering the checks. If we get into a situation that we see we need them, we'll,
And if you need an additional signer, I can be, if it's not a conflict of interest with me being the treasurer.
No, usually the treasurer is on the account.
Okay.
so can we make an amendment to that motion about assigning 2 of the board members to be approved signatories?
Signing.
Signing,
Signatories.
I don't mind I mean, I've done it before, it's no big deal. I can do it if.
I mean, I'll make a motion to amend it
Okay,
for that.
so I'd like to be on it since, as chair. No offense, Ryan.
Have
And-
at it, doesn't matter to me.
And AJ is treasurer. That's how it's typically been done. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And it may be that never comes up because we're not gonna be writing checks. But it gives a little cushion if Ms. Brock is not available or you're not available, that one of us can step in.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is the end of the process. So normally, we get an application, we review it, we vote on it, we send it to county council if approved, and then it closes within, I think, 6 to 12 months. So it's not, it's a long process. Okay, so all those in favor of the motion on the floor, raise your hand. Thank you. And is there any other business? I know that was a lot, and I thank y'all for asking great questions. It's, if you ever have any questions, you can reach out to me. And also go back and look at the ordinances that Jennifer sent. I think that is so helpful. And it spells everything out, the process, it's pretty clear what our role is.
Is that a conflict of interest?
You wanna ask something?
Oh, no, I was just
Oh, okay.
telling Barry something.
Oh, okay. Okay, the meeting's adjourned, thank you.
Thank